when my daughter, Emily, told me to figure out your own arrangements. You're just dead weight now. I packed my belongings like the compliant mother I'd always been. 4 days later, I found myself in an attorney's office, uncovering that my supposedly devoted husband had orchestrated the most elaborate chess match of his lifetime. Emily was about to discover that sometimes the overlooked piece captures the king. If you're following this story, please subscribe and let me know what state you're watching from. Let me share how I transformed from a discarded widow to the woman holding every advantage. Because, friends, this tale has more unexpected turns than a mountain highway. 3 months ago, I was Dorothy Wilson, faithful wife of 45 years and mother to one remarkably selfish daughter. When Robert died from complications following surgery, at 73, I believed my world had collapsed. Emily descended during my mourning period, like a predator in expensive attire, cooing about how overwhelming this transition must be for me. "Mom, you simply cannot maintain this enormous house by yourself," she declared, her voice saturated with manufactured concern. "The upkeep, the isolation, all these painful memories. It's unhealthy for someone your age." I should have recognized the calculation behind her sympathy. Emily had always been Robert's pride and joy, his precious princess who could commit no wrong. When she married that finance executive, David, and began producing grandchildren, Robert showered them with attention and resources. Meanwhile, I remained simply the woman who prepared meals, maintained the household, and ensured everything operated seamlessly. Following the funeral, Emily became increasingly aggressive about my living situation. She'd arrive with David for family gatherings, where they'd ambush me with real estate brochures and assisted living pamphlets. "Mom, these communities are absolutely wonderful," Emily would insist. "You'd have peers your own age, organized activities, zero responsibilities. Think of the freedom." What they actually meant was no inheritance to complicate, no inconvenient mother to accommodate. The devastating blow arrived last Wednesday. I'd been residing in what Emily now called our family home for 7 weeks since Robert's passing, still sleeping in the guest bedroom because I couldn't bear to sort through our master suite. Emily appeared without notice, accompanied by David and 3 large moving boxers. "Mom, we've reached a decision. David received the partnership offer, and we need to relocate to the city immediately. This house is perfect for our family's needs." I stared at her, struggling to comprehend. "Relocate here? But this is my home, Emily." Emily's facade slipped momentarily, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's legal documents, I inherited the entire estate, the house, the investment accounts, everything. I've been allowing you to remain here out of compassion, but it's time for you to establish your own residence." The words struck me like physical violence. "Emily, surely there's been some error." "No error whatsoever. Dad understood I'd preserve his legacy better than you ever could. You never grasped financial matters or investment strategies. You were simply the spouse." Simply the spouse. 45 years reduced to those 3 words. That's when she delivered the crushing finale. "Figure out your own arrangements. You're just dead weight now." I packed my possessions in 2 days. 45 years of marriage condensed into 2 suitcases and 1 small container of photographs. Emily observed from the hallway, checking her smartphone like I was delaying something important. "There's a decent senior facility on Elmwood Avenue," she offered with the enthusiasm of someone recommending a mediocre restaurant. "Very reasonably priced. I'm confident they have availability." Reasonably priced. My daughter was inheriting $37 million and suggesting I investigate what amounted to a subsidized facility. David loaded my luggage into their Mercedes with the efficiency of someone disposing of trash. "Dorothy, you'll appreciate having your independence restored," he stated, avoiding direct eye contact. "No more concerns about property maintenance or tax obligations. No more home," he meant. As we departed, I watched my house, Robert's house, Emily's house now, vanish in the side mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 4.5 decades transforming that structure into a home, hosting Emily's celebrations, nursing Robert through his ailments, maintaining every detail he valued. Now I was being transported to a budget motel like an unwelcome visitor who'd exceeded their stay. The Riverside Lodge matched expectations for a place charging $55 nightly, paper-thin walls, threadbare linens, and carpeting that had witnessed better decades. Emily handed me $250 in cash like she was tipping hotel staff. "This should sustain you for several days while you get situated," she announced. "I'll have David transfer some funds to your account once we organize Dad's paperwork." Some funds from my own inheritance. After their departure, I sat on the sagging mattress, attempting to process what had transpired. Within 4 hours, I'd transformed from grieving widow to homeless senior citizen. The woman I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for had discarded me like expired medication. But as I sat in that depressing motel room, something began troubling me. Robert had always been meticulous about his affairs, obsessively organized regarding important documents. He'd shown me the will years earlier, explaining his intentions, ensuring I understood everything. I was absolutely certain that wasn't what it had stated. Robert had been many things: traditional, occasionally stubborn, sometimes condescending about financial matters, but he wasn't cruel. The man who'd held my hand through my father's death, who'd surprised me with flowers every anniversary, wouldn't have left me destitute the following morning. I used the motel's Wi-Fi to locate Robert's attorney, William Anderson, the same lawyer who'd handled our home purchase and various business matters throughout the years. His office was downtown, a 30-minute bus journey that consumed precious cash but seemed necessary. William Anderson was a distinguished gentleman in his mid-70s, with compassionate eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. When his secretary announced that Mrs. Wilson was present regarding her husband's estate, he appeared genuinely surprised. "Dorothy, my dear, I was wondering when you'd visit. I attempted calling your residence multiple times, but Emily indicated you were traveling." Traveling, that's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Anderson, I need to inquire about Robert's will." He looked puzzled. "Certainly, didn't Emily provide you with your copy?" I gave her the original and several duplicates following the reading. My stomach plummeted. There was a reading. "Dorothy, you were supposed to attend. Emily claimed you were too emotionally fragile, that she'd handle everything and ensure you received your inheritance." The blood drained from my face as reality struck me. "Mr. Anderson, I was never informed about any reading. Emily told me she inherited everything." William Anderson's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He reached for a thick file folder, his movement suddenly urgent. "Dorothy, that's impossible. Your husband's will is extremely specific about your inheritance." He extracted a document. I recognized Robert's precise signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. But as William began reading, I realized Emily had lied about everything. "Robert Edward Wilson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Dorothy Marie Wilson, the following: our primary residence at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her 75% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $26 million. My head began spinning. $26 million. The house, 75% of everything. William continued reading, his voice growing more grave. "To my daughter, Emily Wilson Davis, I leave $11 million to be held in trust with distributions beginning on her 47th birthday. Contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death. Contingent upon her treatment of me." Robert had known. Somehow, he'd anticipated exactly what Emily would attempt. "Mr. Anderson," I whispered. "Emily told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house. She gave me $250 and suggested I find assisted living." The elderly attorney's face flushed with indignation. "Dorothy, what Emily has done constitutes elder abuse and fraud. She's committed multiple felonies. But she possessed legal documents. She showed me papers, forged, most likely, or documents from an earlier draft. Your husband updated his will 8 months before his death specifically because he was concerned about Emily's attitude toward money and her sense of entitlement." The room was spinning. All those times Emily had dismissed my opinions, interrupted me during family conversations, rolled her eyes when I attempted to contribute to discussions about their expensive vacations or David's business ventures. Robert had been observing, evaluating, making decisions. "There's more, Dorothy. The trust provision for Emily specifically states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity following my death, the entire $11 million transfers to you instead." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying your daughter just cost herself $11 million. Her inheritance is now yours as well." You're not inheriting 26 million, Dorothy. You're inheriting 37 million, plus the house and all personal property. The irony was so perfect, it was almost amusing. Emily had been so eager to claim her inheritance that she'd triggered the exact clause designed to protect me from her greed. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely steady. Williams smiled, and for the first time since Robert's death, I witnessed genuine warmth directed toward me. Now, my dear, we contact the authorities about the fraud, and then we call Emily and inform her that she's about to experience the shock of her lifetime. Can she contest this? With what resources? She's about to discover that every account she believed she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset except the house is frozen, pending investigation of her fraudulent activities. I thought about Emily in my house, probably already planning renovations, shopping for new furniture with money she believed was hers. David was probably calculating how the inheritance would impact his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in approximately 6 hours, their entire world was going to collapse. William Anderson's office became command headquarters for what he cheerfully termed Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still processing the magnitude of Emily's deception. The forged documents are quite sophisticated, Detective Williams explained as she examined the counterfeit will Emily had shown me. This wasn't a spontaneous crime. Someone planned this meticulously. Do you believe Emily had assistance? I asked. Almost certainly, creating convincing legal forgeries requires specialized knowledge and connections. We'll need to investigate whether David or someone in his financial network was involved. Within 3 hours, every account had been frozen. Emily's credit cards linked to what she assumed were her new inheritance accounts were declined. The house utilities, which she'd already transferred to her name, were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at exactly 4:23 p.m. Emily's name appeared on the screen. Mom, where are you? There's some kind of error with the bank accounts. They're claiming Daddy's assets are frozen. Hello, Emily. I'm sitting in William Anderson's office. You remember him, don't you? Daddy's attorney. The one who read the actual will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling. Silence. Then, Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar and a thief, sweetheart. I also discovered that your father was much more perceptive than either of us realized. You don't understand. I was protecting you from the complexity of managing substantial wealth. You've never had to handle investments, or I understand perfectly. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 69-year-old mother out of her own house because you assumed I was too stupid to notice. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. Mom, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously exploiting your emotional vulnerability. The audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, Emily was attempting to manipulate me. Emily, dear, let me clarify something for you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual inheritance, the $11 million your father left you, is now mine as well, thanks to a lovely clause he included about treating me with dignity and respect. That's impossible. Detective Williams is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The phone went silent. I could almost hear Emily's mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. Mom, please, can we meet somewhere and discuss this reasonably? I'm sure we can resolve something. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon at the courthouse when you're arraigned. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. Watch me. I disconnected and looked at William, who was beaming with approval. How long before she's arrested? Detective Williams has sufficient evidence for a warrant. They'll apprehend her this evening. And David, his financial records are being subpoenaed. If he participated in creating those documents, he'll face charges as well. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Mom, please don't do this. Think about the grandchildren. I showed the message to Detective Williams, who smiled grimly. Emotional manipulation. Classic behavior pattern for this type of crime. I typed back, I am thinking about them. They deserve to see what happens when you steal from family. 25 minutes later, David called. Dorothy, surely we can resolve this privately. Emily made some poor decisions, but involving law enforcement seems excessive. David, did you help her forge those documents? That's not Dorothy. You have to understand the pressure Emily was under. She was worried about your mental state, your ability to handle large sums of money. So, that's a yes. It wasn't malicious. She genuinely believed she was protecting you by throwing me out of my house and telling me to figure out my own arrangements. David was quiet. David, here's what's going to happen. You're both going to be arrested. You're both going to face federal fraud charges, and I'm going to be sitting in my house, watching it all unfold. Dorothy, please be reasonable. I was reasonable for 45 years. It didn't work out well for me. The police arrested Emily at 9:15 p.m. while she was dining at a fancy restaurant, apparently celebrating her inheritance with David and another couple. According to Detective Williams, she screamed about false arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be David's golf partner and had no experience with criminal law. David was arrested at his office the following morning. The forensic accountant had traced the forged documents to a printing company David's firm used for creating fraudulent investment prospectuses. Apparently, my son-in-law had quite the criminal resume that Emily either didn't know about or chose to ignore. Spent my first night back in my house sleeping in the master bedroom. Emily had already moved her belongings into the space, replacing Robert's careful organization with her chaos of designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed everything into garbage bags and left them on the front porch. She could collect them when she made bail. The house felt different now. Not because Robert was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. For decades, I'd maintained it as Robert's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, his vision of how we should live. Now, looking around with clear eyes, I realized how little of me had ever been reflected in these rooms. That was about to change. William called around noon with updates. Emily's bail is set at $75,000. Since all her accounts are frozen, she'll have to find someone else to cover it. What about David? $250,000. Apparently, the judge wasn't impressed. With his history of financial crimes, who knew your son-in-law had been under investigation for securities fraud? I certainly hadn't known. But then again, I'd been excluded from most family financial discussions. Emily and David had always spoken to me like I was a child when money came up, simplifying concepts they assumed I couldn't understand. They were about to learn how much I'd actually understood. William, I want to make some changes to the house. Emily had contractors scheduled to renovate. I'd like to proceed with some of those plans, but with my own vision. Excellent idea. It's your home now, Dorothy. Do whatever makes you happy. What made me happy, I realized, was the idea of undoing every assumption Emily had made about my inheritance. She'd planned to gut the kitchen, replace the hardwood floors, and convert Robert's study into a wine cellar. I was going to turn the study into an art studio, and the wine cellar plans into a library. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Wilson, this is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 12 News. We understand you're the victim of a significant elder fraud case involving your daughter. Would you be willing to share your story? Word was spreading. In a city this size, the arrest of a prominent investment banker and his wife for defrauding his elderly mother-in-law was news. Miss Martinez, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not prepared to make public statements. I understand this must be difficult, but your story could help other seniors recognize warning signs of family financial abuse. She had a point. How many other women my age were being manipulated by adult children who saw them as inconvenient obstacles to inheritance? If I decided to tell my story, would I have control over how it's presented? Absolutely. We could arrange a sit-down interview where you'd have approval over the final edit. I thought about Emily, probably sitting in a jail cell right now, still believing this was all a misunderstanding she could charm her way out of. Miss Martinez, let me get back to you. I might have quite a story to tell. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine David had sent us for Christmas wine. I was apparently now drinking in my own house, purchased with my own money, while contemplating whether to publicly discuss my daughter's actions on television. Life had certainly taken an interesting turn. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Through the window, I could see Emily on my front porch, wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. She'd made bail somehow, opened the door but didn't invite her in. Mom, please, we need to talk. We talked yesterday. You told me to figure out my own arrangements. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm still your daughter, are you? because daughters don't typically forge legal documents to steal their mother's inheritances. I wasn't stealing. I was. She stopped, clearly struggling to find words that didn't sound criminal. You were what, Emily? I was trying to protect you from making poor financial decisions. You've never managed large amounts of money. Even now, even after being arrested for fraud, she couldn't admit the truth. In Emily's mind, she was still the victim of my unreasonable expectations. Emily, let me share something your father told me 8 months before he died. He said he was worried about your sense of entitlement, your attitude toward money, and how you treated people you considered beneath you. Her face went pale. Daddy never said that. He said you reminded him of his sister, Eleanor Boot, charming and completely incapable of thinking about anyone but yourself. He told me he was changing the will specifically because he was afraid of what you'd do to me if you had control. That's a lie. I pulled out my phone and showed her. Video recording. Actually, it's not. Your father recorded a video message explaining his decision to be played if you ever contested the will or if you treated me poorly after his death. Emily stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. He knew, sweetheart. He knew exactly who you were underneath all that charm. The only thing he didn't predict was how far you'd actually go. Play it, she whispered. I touched the screen, and Robert's voice filled the morning air, clear, measured, and absolutely devastating. If you're hearing this, Emily, it means my fears about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that my daughter had more integrity than I suspected. But if Dorothy is playing this recording, it means you've proven me right in the worst possible way. Emily sank onto the porch steps as Robert's voice continued. I spent 45 years watching your mother sacrifice her dreams, her ambitions, her independence to take care of our family. She worked part-time jobs to help pay for your college while I built my business. She postponed her education, gave up career opportunities, and poured herself into being the wife and mother she thought we needed. The recording continued for 4 more minutes, each word carefully chosen, each sentence a scalpel cutting through Emily's justifications and self-deceptions. By the time you hear this, you'll have discovered that treating your mother poorly has cost you everything. I hope it was worth it. When it ended, Emily was crying. Not the pretty tears she'd used to manipulate people since childhood, but ugly, broken sobs. He hated me, she whispered. No, Emily, he loved you enough to hope you'd prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right instead. She looked up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The fraud charges, the investigation, the public humiliation when the story hits the news. The news, Channel 12 wants to interview me about elder financial abuse. I'm thinking of saying yes. Emily's face crumpled completely. Mom, please, think about what this will do to the grandchildren, to David's career, to our whole family. I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about how you didn't consider any of those things when you decided to commit multiple felonies. She stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. I know you won't believe this, but I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted the money. I wanted the security, the status. I wanted to never have to worry about anything again. For the first time since this nightmare began, Emily was telling the truth. I believe you, sweetheart. But wanting something doesn't justify destroying people to get it. She nodded, tears still flowing. What can I do to fix this? You can start by admitting what you did was wrong. Not misguided, not protective, not complicated. Wrong. It was wrong. It was completely, unforgivably wrong. And then you can face whatever consequences come next with some dignity, instead of trying to manipulate your way out of them. Emily looked at me for a long moment, seeing perhaps, for the first time, not the pushover mother she'd always known, but the woman who had just outmaneuvered her completely. I deserved this, didn't I? Yes, Emily, you absolutely did. For days, after Emily's porch confession, David's mother showed up at my door. Eleanor Davis was everything I'd expected. Perfectly coiffed, dripping with jewelry, and radiating the kind of entitlement that only comes from 3 generations of inherited wealth. Dorothy, we need to discuss this situation rationally. One invited her in, curious to see what version of reality the Davis family had constructed to explain their son's legal charges. Eleanor settled herself in my living room like she was granting me an audience. David made some poor choices, obviously, but prosecuting him seems rather vindictive, don't you think? Vindictive? Your son helped take my inheritance and threw me out of my own house. David was following Emily's lead. He didn't understand the full situation. The woman was actually trying to blame my daughter for her son's actions. I had to admire the audacity. Mrs. Davis, David created fake legal documents. That's not following someone's lead. That's conspiracy. David's attorney believes we can reach a settlement that benefits everyone. You get your house back. Emily faces appropriate consequences, and David avoids the publicity of a trial. Appropriate consequences as, if Emily's actions were a minor etiquette violation, what kind of settlement? Eleanor smiled, clearly believing she'd found an opening. David's family is prepared to compensate you for your inconvenience. Let's say $3 million in exchange for dropping the charges against him. $3 million to forgive the man who'd helped take everything from me. Mrs. Davis, your son participated in a scheme that cost me everything I owned. You think $3 million covers that? Dorothy, be realistic. David has a career, children, a reputation to maintain. Sending him to a correctional facility serves no one. It serves justice. Eleanor's polished facade cracked slightly. Justice, you're destroying multiple families over money you'd never have known how to manage anyway. There it was. The same condescending attitude that had poisoned my relationship with Emily. In their world, I was just the help who'd gotten uppity. Mrs. Davis, I think we're done here. Dorothy, please reconsider. $7 million, final offer, $7 million to let David walk free. The amount was staggering, but the principle was non-negotiable. My answer is no. Eleanor stood, her composure completely restored. Very well, but you should know that David's legal team has found some interesting information about your husband's business practices. It would be unfortunate if that became public during the trial. The threat was clear, but I felt no fear, only curiosity. What kind of information? The kind that might make you reconsider who the real person at fault in this situation was. After she left, I called William immediately. Dorothy, whatever they think they found, it doesn't change the facts of Emily and David's actions. But, could it affect the case? Potentially, if they can muddy the waters enough, create doubt about Robert's character or business practices, it might influence a jury. I thought about Robert, about our marriage, about all the secrets that might be buried in 45 years of shared life. William, I want to know everything about Robert's business. Every deal, every partnership, every potential irregularity. Dorothy, are you sure? Sometimes the past is better left alone. The Davis family is threatening to drag Robert's memory through the mud to protect their son. I'd rather know the truth first. That evening, I sat in Robert's study, my study. Noan began going through his files systematically. Robert had been meticulously organized, every document dated and categorized, but as I dug deeper into his business records, I began finding things that didn't quite make sense. Payments to shell companies, consulting fees that seemed excessive, partnerships with firms that appeared to exist only on paper. By midnight, I discovered something that changed everything. I thought I knew about my husband. The private investigator William recommended was a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Chang, who specialized in financial cases. She spent 8 hours in the study photographing documents and building what she called the real picture of my husband's business empire. Mrs. Wilson, your husband was running a sophisticated operation through his consulting firm. We're talking about millions of dollars in questionable transactions over the past 15 years. The revelation hit me hard. That's impossible. Robert was the most honest man I knew. I'm sorry, but the evidence is overwhelming. He was moving money for organized groups, using his legitimate business as a front. I stared at the documents spread across Robert's desk. Invoices for services never rendered. Consulting contracts with companies that didn't exist. How long has this been going on? Based on these records, at least 15 years, probably longer, 15 years. While I was planning dinner parties and attending charity galas, my husband was facilitating shady enterprises. Mrs. Wilson, there's more. The $11 million Robert left Emily, that money came directly from these funds. If the authorities discover this, they'll seize everything as proceeds of this activity. The room started spinning. Everything. The house, the investments, all of it. Unless what? Lisa looked uncomfortable. Unless Emily and David's legal team already knows about this and is planning to use it as leverage. If they tip off the FBI, about your husband's actions. They might be able to negotiate immunity in exchange for cooperation. My daughter and her husband weren't just thieves. They were holding a nuclear weapon over my head. What are my options? Legally, you could contact the authorities yourself, come forward voluntarily, and hope for leniency. You'd lose most of the money, but you might keep the house. And if I don't, Emily and David's lawyers will probably leak this information strategically. You'll lose everything anyway, but you'll also face potential issues for unknowingly benefiting from this activity. I thought about Eleanor Davis's smug confidence, her certainty that I'd accept their settlement offer. They'd known about Robert's actions all along. Lisa, how did they find out about this? David's an investment banker. He'd have recognized the patterns in your husband's financial records. The question is, what are they planning to do with this information? My phone rang. Emily's number. Mom, we need to meet tonight. There are things you need to know about Daddy that change everything. I already know. Emily. Silence. Then, you know what I know about the money. I know about the connections. I know that everything your father left us is tainted. Mom, listen to me carefully. David's lawyers have been in contact with the FBI. They're willing to let us renegotiate our situation. What kind of renegotiation? David gets immunity in exchange for providing information about Daddy's network. You get to keep $7 million and the house. The rest goes to the government. And you, the charges disappear. We all walk away from this mess. It was brilliant in a twisted way. Emily had turned my moral victory into her strategic advantage. Emily, you're asking me to help you benefit from your actions by exploiting Daddy's actions. I'm asking you to be practical. The alternative is losing everything and potentially facing issues yourself. I looked around Robert's study, seeing it clearly for the first time. The expensive furniture, the rare books, the art collection, all of it purchased with questionable money. I need time to think. Mom, the meeting is tomorrow morning. David's attorney needs an answer tonight. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of Robert's study, surrounded by the evidence of his double life. 45 years of marriage to a stranger. A daughter who'd inherited more than money from her father. She'd inherited his talent for deception. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated who I was when my back was against the wall. Picked up the phone and dialed Lisa Chang. Lisa, how quickly can you get me a meeting with the authorities? I have a story to tell them, and I think they're going to find it very interesting. Agent Maria Santos looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a federal investigator. Serious, intelligent, and completely immune to charm. She sat across from me in William's conference room, recording our conversation and taking notes with mechanical precision. Mrs. Wilson, you understand that by coming forward voluntarily, you're potentially admitting to benefiting from these proceeds. I understand, but I'd rather tell you the truth than let my daughter and her husband manipulate this situation to their advantage. I laid out everything: Robert's hidden business, Emily's scheme, David's forgeries, and the pressure attempt masquerading as a settlement offer. Your daughter believes she can trade information about your husband's actions for immunity from her own charges. That's exactly what she believes, and she thinks I'll cooperate because I'm afraid of losing everything. Agent Santos smiled for the first time. Are you afraid, Mrs. Wilson? Agent Santos? 3 weeks ago, I was a grieving widow sleeping in a budget motel. Today, I'm sitting here voluntarily talking to federal agents about my dead husband's enterprise. Fear is no longer my primary emotion. What is anger? Pure, crystallized anger at being manipulated by people who underestimated my intelligence for decades. Agent Santos's smile widened. Mrs. Wilson, would you be willing to wear a wire? 4 hours later, I was sitting in my living room, with a recording device, waiting for Emily and David to arrive for what they thought was a surrender meeting. They knocked at exactly 8:30 p.m., both dressed like they were attending a business dinner. David carried a briefcase that probably contained immunity agreements and settlement papers. Mom, you look better than you have in weeks, Emily said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. I feel better. Clarity has that effect. David opened his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd conducted similar negotiations before. Dorothy, our attorneys have structured this very favorably for you. You retain the house, $7 million in clean assets, and complete immunity from any issues related to Robert's activities. Clean assets, that's an interesting phrase. Emily shot David a warning look. Mom, the important thing is that we're all protected. the past stays buried, and we all move forward. What about the $37 million Robert actually left me? Mom, that money is tainted. It can't be separated from Daddy's activities. Taking $7 million is the best outcome possible. And you too. What do you get out of this arrangement? David leaned forward, his confidence returning. We get to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. Emily's charges disappear. My reputation remains intact, and our family can heal. Misunderstanding. He was still calling it a misunderstanding. David, help me understand something. When exactly did you discover Robert's activities? What do you mean? I mean, did you know about the money when you married Emily, or did you discover it recently when you were planning to take my inheritance? David and Emily exchanged glances. Dorothy, I don't think that's relevant to our current discussion. Actually, I think it's very relevant. Because if you knew about Robert's actions and said nothing, that makes you involved. And if you only discovered them while committing your own actions, that makes you remarkably unlucky. Emily's composure was starting to crack. Mom, what are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that you two have been planning this for months, possibly years. The fake will, the discovery, even David's connections to document creators. None of this was spontaneous. That's ridiculous. Is it? Agent Santos finds it quite plausible. The color drained from both their faces. Agent Santos, David whispered, FBI. She's been very interested in my story about systematic elder issues, fraud, and pressure, particularly the part where you tried to influence me with my dead husband's actions. David stood up abruptly, reaching for his briefcase. Dorothy, this conversation is over. Actually, David, I think it's just beginning. Agent Santos and two other federal agents entered my living room as Emily and David sat frozen in place. The briefcase was confiscated immediately, along with both their phones. Emily Wilson Davis and David Davis, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted coercion of a federal witness. Emily turned to me with an expression of absolute betrayal. Mom, how could you do this to your own family? The same way you could fake legal documents and take my inheritance. Sweetheart, except my way is legal. As the agents handcuffed them, David tried one last, desperate play. Dorothy, you don't understand what you've done. There are people connected to Robert's business who won't appreciate federal attention. You've put yourself in a difficult position. Agent Santos paused in reading them their rights. Mr. Davis, are you threatening a federal witness? I'm warning her about the reality of her situation. The reality, Agent Santos said, is that you just added witness intimidation to your charges. After they were removed, Agent Santos sat back down across from me. Mrs. Wilson, David's warning might not be entirely empty. Your husband was connected to some dangerous people. How dangerous? The Castellano Group, primarily. They've been using legitimate businesses to move money for decades. Your husband's consulting firm was one of their most successful operations. The name meant nothing to me, but the agent's expression told me everything I needed to know. Are you saying I'm in actual physical danger? Potentially, but there's something else you should know about your husband's operation. Something that changes everything. Agent Santos pulled out a thick file folder, the kind that suggested months of investigation. Mrs. Wilson, your husband wasn't just moving money for the Castellano Group. He was an FBI informant. The world tilted sideways. For 15 years, he was providing information about their operations while appearing to facilitate their money movement. The operation was so sensitive that even local FBI offices weren't informed. Your husband was helping us build cases against multiple groups, but the money was real. The FBI allowed him to keep a percentage of the funds as payment for his cooperation, and to maintain his cover. Everything he left you was earned through legitimate federal cooperation. I stared at her, trying to process this revelation. So the $37 million is legally yours. Your husband died before the investigation concluded, but his cooperation over 15 years directly led to 63 arrests and the seizure of over $300 million in assets. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because the investigation was ongoing and because we weren't certain about your involvement or knowledge. Your daughter and son-in-law's scheme actually helped us confirm your innocence. Emily and David didn't know any of this. They suspected activity, but they had no idea about the federal cooperation. They were planning to pressure you with information that would have actually cleared your husband. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Emily had tried to take my inheritance twice, once through fraud and once through pressure based on incomplete information. Agent Santos, what happens now? Now you get your money back. Your daughter and son-in-law face federal charges, and you get to decide what kind of life you want to build with your legitimate inheritance. And the difficulty David mentioned. The Castellano group will be too busy dealing with their own legal problems to worry about you. We're executing search warrants across 4 states tomorrow morning. I looked around my living room, seeing it again as the site of my resurrection rather than my humiliation. Agent Santos, can I ask you something? Of course. In your professional opinion, am I a terrible person for feeling satisfaction about Emily's arrest? Agent Santos smiled. Mrs. Wilson, in my professional opinion, you're a woman who refused to be victimized. That's not terrible. That's inspiring. 8 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my renovated house, making coffee for 2. The morning sun streamed through new windows that actually opened properly, illuminating countertops I'd chosen myself for the first time in 45 years. Good morning, Dorothy. Dr. Manda Chen, Lisa's sister, and my new financial advisor, appeared in the doorway carrying a thick folder of investment reports. Good morning, Amanda. Ready for our quarterly review? The past 8 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media interviews, and personal transformation. Emily and David were each serving sentences. The news coverage of their actions had made me something of a celebrity in senior advocacy circles. Your portfolio is performing excellently, Amanda said, settling at my new breakfast table. The charitable foundation is fully operational, and the scholarship fund has already selected its first recipients. The Dorothy Wilson Foundation for Elder Protection had become my primary focus. Using $20 million of my inheritance, we were funding legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse and supporting legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. Any word on the documentary? Netflix confirmed the production deal. They want to start filming next month. My story had captured media attention far beyond the initial news coverage. The Mother's Gambit, an American justice story, was being developed as a limited series, with the proceeds going to elder advocacy organizations. And Emily. Amanda's expression grew careful. She's written again. Her attorney says she wants to apologize and ask for forgiveness. Emily had written me 23 letters. I'd read the first few, which ranged from self-justifying to desperate, before deciding to stop opening them. Some relationships, once broken, can't be repaired with words. Amanda, has my stance on that changed? Not according to our previous conversations, but people do evolve, Dorothy. Even people who've made terrible choices. I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, grieving, dependent, willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity my family offered me. That woman might have felt obligated to forgive Emily, to rebuild a relationship based on guilt and tradition. But that woman was gone. Amanda, schedule a meeting with Emily's attorney. Not to reconcile, but to make something clear. What kind of thing? I want Emily to understand that her actions had consequences beyond legal punishment. I want her to know that she destroyed our relationship permanently, and that her children will grow up knowing why their mother had to face consequences. That seems firm. Good, it's supposed to be firm. Emily made adult choices that hurt people she was supposed to love. She doesn't get to escape the emotional consequences just because she's written some letters. Amanda made notes in her leather portfolio. And the grandchildren. Emily's requested supervised visits with them. My relationship with Emily's children will be based on their choices when they're adults, not their mother's rehabilitation efforts. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck with a large package. Must be the new easel for the studio, I told Amanda. The art studio had been my favorite renovation project. Robert's former den was now a bright, airy space where I was rediscovering my love of painting, something I'd abandoned when I got married and assumed the role of supporting wife and mother. Dorothy, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret how this all played out? The sentences, the media attention, the permanent family estrangement? I considered the question while signing for my delivery. 8 months ago, I'd been invisible, a widow with no money, no home, and no prospects. Today, I was a philanthropist with a foundation, a documentary deal, and a purpose that extended far beyond my own survival. Amanda, my daughter, tried to take everything I owned and leave me homeless. My son-in-law created fake documents and threatened me. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless to stop them. But they're still family. No, they're still DNA. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the people who exploit your vulnerability for benefit. Amanda closed her portfolio, satisfied with my response. Besides, I added, look what I became when I stopped allowing them to define my worth. After Amanda left, I walked through my house, really, my house now, decorated according to my taste, organized around my priorities. In the art studio, I uncovered my latest painting, a self-portrait of a woman standing in bright sunlight, her face turned toward the future. The woman in the painting looked nothing like the grieving widow who'd packed her life into 2 suitcases 8 months ago. This woman looked powerful, independent, unafraid. She looked like someone who'd learned that the best response isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your opponents never thought you could be. Outside, the sun was setting behind trees. I'd planted myself in soil that belonged to me, on property I defended through intelligence and courage rather than inherited through marriage or birth. Tomorrow, I'd continue building the life I'd chosen rather than the life others had planned for me. And if Emily wanted to rebuild a relationship with this woman, she'd better bring a lot more than letters and hollow apologies. She'd better bring a complete transformation, one that matched my own. Thanks for following my story. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your experiences in the comments. Your voice matters, and your story could help someone else find their strength when they need it.